Hello and welcome everybody to my Sonic Adventure playstyle series. These are a collection of videos that are focused around providing concepts for the Sonic cast in a theoretical new Sonic Adventure game, thus equipping them with gameplay that I feel builds off the principles of said games. Previously in this series, I outlined the playstyles of 6 core characters. They are the choices I would push to include for a new adventure. I believe that between them, there is enough variety offered for the gameplay experience, whilst having none being too different from one another. 6 characters also is what I believe to be the upper limit of a reasonably sized playable cast. Any more, and I would have serious concerns about the viability of producing the project to a high standard. Therefore, I just want to make it quite clear that it is those original 6 videos which I stand for in the event that a new adventure-styled game becomes a possibility. So, if that is my opinion, what are we doing here then? Well, just because I believe additional characters are not necessary, it doesn't mean they cannot be explored. After all, just because the original 6 were my choices, it doesn't mean they wouldn't be the 6 chosen in an actual production. I mean, if we're being realistic, we would be lucky to get 3 playable characters that were not different versions of Sonic, but that's neither here nor there. As such, I would recommend that you consider this second wave of characters I will be presenting as either DLC characters, characters in a spin-off, or even as a replacement to one of the original 6 characters. Just keep in mind that the more characters we cover, the more likely it will be for the playstyles created to begin having some form of overlap with others. There are only so many things we can do, but hey, I may surprise myself. With that out of the way, for those of you who are new or have forgotten the rules, let's go over them again. The goal of the playstyles created for this series is to adapt the members of the Sonic cast to having fitting gameplay both for their character, but also which would reasonably fit into the adventure formula. It is hoped that this also helps demonstrate how secondary characters beyond Sonic are still very much a viable choice for engaging gameplay. Additionally, I must refrain from using 2D sections within levels, as modern Sonic has come to rely upon them too heavily, and the Adventure series is known for its true 3D gameplay. Now that you're all caught up, it's time to address our newest arrival, and I've heard she is somewhat of a rascal.
Amy Rose is here!
Amy has been present in many of Sonic's adventures, although for a good portion of them she was limited to the narrative or side content only. That said, she has enough playable appearances to pull inspiration from for this video. Amy herself has a go-getter attitude, always wanting to get involved and help out, making her perfectly suited for a more action-based playstyle. My aim for Amy is to construct a more thoughtful counterpart to Sonic's traditional gameplay. Despite having a lot of passion and vigour, Amy is naturally going to struggle more compared to someone like Sonic, and I want her gameplay to reflect that. Amy should be a character that, at surface level, may seem like a more tedious Sonic, but will have many more options available to her. Learning when and how to use all of her moves to the highest standard should not only feel rewarding, but powerful as well. We will be using the Xbox controller for reference when referring to control schemes in this video. Amy can be moved about by pushing the left thumbstick. She has full 360 degrees movement and responsive turning at low speeds. On that note, Amy's acceleration is pretty poor. In fact, it would be currently the slowest acceleration in my Sonic Adventure 3 series. Her top speed, however, would be comparable to someone like Tails. She just has to put a bit more effort into getting there. Whilst idle and gaining speed, Amy is unarmed, but at top speed she will hold her hammer. Pressing the X button will cause Amy to swing her hammer against the ground, with a resulting pink shockwave. Both the hammer itself and the following shockwave can deal damage and grab items. When attacking with the hammer, Amy will halt all momentum, so players looking to keep pace may wish to find an alternative method of attack. If the X button is held instead of press, Amy will hold her Pico Pico hammer to the side and begin spinning, similar to the Warrior Feather from Sonic Adventure, except the player has the ability to move Amy in any direction during the attack. This makes what was once a stationary maneuver gain legitimate combat utility, as it rapidly depletes the health of tankier foes. Despite those benefits, after about 3 seconds Amy will cease spinning and become dizzy, moving sluggishly in random directions for a few seconds with the player unable to act. This is a move players will need to carefully consider when to use. Alternatively, pressing the B button will instead cause Amy to perform a quick leap, much like as she does in Sonic Advance. This leap will propel Amy forward with a brief burst of momentum as she travels through the air. Upon hitting the ground shortly after, this momentum is transferred to her running speed. This move is one way of circumventing Amy's slower acceleration, but of course, if done at an inopportune moment, it would leave her quite vulnerable. The B button can be pressed during the leap to use a slide tackle, again, like in Sonic Advance. It is a decent attack that also allows Amy to slide under low gaps, but she will have to clean off her eyes and get back to her feet before the player can act again. Whilst Amy is running with her hammer out, pressing the X button will instead cause her to strike the ground with her hammer and vault up into the air with considerable height, much like in Sonic Adventure. A less flashy way of entering the air can be achieved by pressing the A button, however this jump does not reach as high as the hammer vault. Amy does not curl into a ball whilst airborne, as such she is at risk when passing enemies. If the A button is held whilst in the air, Amy will start to hold out her hammer and spin it around her. By doing so, she will somehow maintain her current altitude for a few seconds, in addition to harming anything that she comes into contact with. This technique is similar to the ability she had in Sonic Heroes. She can only do this once before needing to touch the ground to do it again. Pressing the X button in the air will allow Amy to swing her hammer in one complete rotation, starting above her head. This is basically her method of hitting enemies with a jump, having to time a swing rather than bump into them like Sonic can. Destroying an enemy in this way does not cause Amy to gain a small bounce of height, as that could disrupt the player trying to maintain enough speed for a hammer vault. Pressing the B button in the air will instead cause Amy to spiral downwards with her hammer for a hammer drop. This technique can also be found in Sonic Advance. The hammer drop acts like a stomp, where Amy cannot act until touching a surface. If the hammer drop collides with an enemy or an item, Amy will rebound upwards, after which she continues to spin, but the player now has control of her positioning. It may be a bit difficult to pull off at first, but proper use of this technique could allow Amy to devastate enemies with large health bars, or even let her pass sections of levels by bouncing off of a chain of nearby enemies. As you can see, Amy has a multitude of options at her disposal to help both mitigate her own shortcomings as well as traverse stages. However, she can become further optimized by skillful play. Obviously this is all theoretical, so there could be some details I am missing, but let me share a few strategies that come to mind. When Amy is at top speed and capable of chaining hammer vaults with air attacks, she is at one of her least vulnerable states. As such, most players will probably strive to maintain and keep hold of momentum for as long as possible. With that in mind, the leap could provide an invaluable action. Regardless of the terrain, if the player were to press the X button as soon as Amy lands from a leap, she would always activate the hammer vault. The reason for this is due to how the leap always generates enough momentum to push Amy into a sprint, but terrain and other factors may quickly reduce her speed. Pressing X at the first possible moment ensures that she is technically sprinting, even if she would have otherwise immediately slowed down, thus performing the hammer vault. The leap has more to offer than that as well. Pressing X before Amy lands back on the ground will make her use the hammer swing like she normally does in the air. Due to how close the leap is to the ground, it is likely Amy would land before finishing the attack. This can be beneficial, as Amy will return to running mid-attack, cancelling the animation. Basically, what I'm saying is players could use the leap attacks to quickly spam air attacks without suffering the penalty of standing still like with the grounded hammer. The downsides are that air hammers do not create a shockwave, and leaps always push Amy forward, but I'm sure some players could find a use for this. Yet another skill of the leap is the fact that it leaves the ground. This means with enough speed, Amy can clear gaps and pits without properly jumping, maintaining top speed. Looking back to combat again, her hammer spin on the ground can actually ignore the dizziness penalty under certain scenarios. If Amy wanders off a ledge before getting dizzy, she will enter her normal falling animation, thus preventing her from getting dizzy. Likewise, should any other event force Amy into the falling or jumping animations, the same result would occur. Whilst Amy's hover skill already allows her to harm enemies, the first few moments after the player holds the A button had Amy start up her swinging. If she destroys an enemy or item at this phase before the full hover is in effect, she will instead not hover and gain height, after which the player is able to activate the hover again. Smart use of this technique could open all sorts of possibilities. The grounded hammer attack thus far has been made out to seem a little slow and undesirable, but here are a few points in its favour. The pink shockwave it creates occurs slightly after the swing of the hammer. This means if Amy lands a direct hit with the hammer, an enemy will take damage from both it and the shockwave straight afterwards. Furthermore, the hammer swing forcing Amy to a standstill could be useful in strict platforming sections in order to control Amy's momentum. Amy doesn't have any special mechanics outside of her own abilities. Her gameplay is structured much like the standard Sonic level. Her objective is to reach the goal at the end of the stage through platforming, momentum, and a bit of combat along the way. She is not a combat-oriented character like Shadow and Omega, but she is capable of dealing a lot of damage due to the techniques outlined earlier. Her levels should naturally take her capabilities into account, but all but the hardest should be designed to be beatable even by players who have not yet grasped her moves fully. That said, the design should most certainly reward players who go the extra mile and master the character, whether it's in the form of shortcuts, skips, secret areas, or just looking cool. Being able to creatively execute Amy's moves needs to do more than just be a bragging right. In addition to reaching the goal type of stages, Amy should also have a chase style mission or two. The principles of such a mission is that there is someone or something Amy is trying to catch up with in the level, and it has a head start on her. The player will need to try and get Amy to catch up with the target before it reaches the end of the stage, which would cause a mission fail if it did. Such a mission would also greatly emphasize a player's mastery of Amy, as they would likely catch the target far sooner than players that largely ignore Amy's skill set. Likewise, it would be possible to reverse this scenario and have a level where Amy is the one that needs to reach the goal before a pursuer catches up with her, a lot like her adventure missions. Her stages would contain many of the typical stage hazards and interactions, such as switches, dash panels and the like. However, Amy is also able to interact with these by touching them with her hammer, giving her a bit more reach compared to the other characters. As for character upgrades, I was able to come up with two that I feel can expand Amy's gameplay without completely trivializing her learning curve. The first of these is the Spring Boot. This upgrade would change the way Amy's slide tackle out of a leap functions. Now, instead of falling face first onto the floor, she will perform a combat roll like Sonic and will get back on her feet whilst running afterwards. This obviously expands the moments when the slide attack could be used, as well as making mandatory slide sections no longer suffer the slide penalty. I was also contemplating giving Amy her ability to double the launch distance of springs by hitting them with her hammer as seen in Sonic Advance, but 3D games would not handle that mechanic anywhere near as well in my opinion. Scripted springs can often be necessary, and doubling the launch distance may break them and kill players. Of course, it could be made to not affect scripted springs, but I'm not convinced its inclusion would enable levels to be made to their best, as designers now need to always consider, what if the player doubles this spring's distance? So, what do you think of my new playstyle for Amy Rose? Quite a bit of the ideas here were seen in her other playable roles, but then updated and reconfigured to all work together. Some people may have preferred if I made Amy play as an outright Sonic clone, but at that point she may as well just be a Sonic skin. Besides, The difficult yet rewarding gameplay of Amy is unique to her in the series and helps support her character. Thank you for watching my video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it and want to see more, please share this video with others so that the discussion may spread. Let me know what your thoughts were of my video in the comments below. Have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.